So like I said, today's Mishnah, it's on page 64 of our book. It's the second section of Ethics of Our Fathers. So it's Perek Beis, and it's Mishnah Test, the 9th Mishnah. And again, when you look at it right away, and I don't know if anyone has it in front of them, Sarah, do you mind just sharing with us a little bit about what you see right away?
You mean reading it or?
Yeah, just in the bold, like just the bold of what this Mishnah is actually talking about.
Okay. Something about someone having students. Okay.
Yeah, so it's talking about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He was a very well-known sage. If you remember, we talked about him during the destruction of the temple, how he actually said, I need the city of Yavna and for scholars or sages. Do you remember that? He escaped the city. We talked about that in the past. Okay, so very fascinating character, leader of the Jewish people. Why is it discussing his students? How does that help us? What is that? How is that? Is that an ethics? What can we learn from here? It basically starts with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 students: Rabbi Eliezer ben Harkanos, Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania, Rabbi Yossi HaKohen, Rabbi Shimon ben Asanel, and Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. Okay, very nice. So we had 5 students. The entire Mishnah, we're talking about students who had teachers, and he said who he learned from. So again, what is this Mishnah dedicated to, and what can we learn from it? Always has to be a practical takeaway, right? Okay, so then he used to list their praise. Okay, he's listing their praise. Cool. Good students, listing who they are. And he said Rabbi Eliezer ben Harkanos is like a cement tank. It does not lose a drop, meaning whatever goes in, he holds on to every piece of information. Okay, you ever met someone like that? Whatever goes in, they hold on to every detail. Certain kids, if you told them last month that next month we're gonna, they don't forget right? And usually it's about things we committed to that we actually are not ready to keep. But that's a different story. But there are people who are like that, right? They remember every single drop of information, whatever it is. Okay, the next one, Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania, what was unique about him? He was fortunate is who gave birth to him. How is that something I need to learn about? The fact that Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania's mother was fortunate because she had him. How is that something I can learn from and gain from, right? Like, what is that my practical takeaway? And the next one is Rabbi Yossi HaKohen, a chassid. Okay, fine. Remember, we talked about in the beginning of Ethics of Our Fathers that what's the term chassid is someone who goes above and beyond the letter of law. Okay, that makes sense. I could learn from the fact, we always said that people think the Hasidic movement is like new. Like a chassid is a new term that was made up 300 years ago. No, right here, the Mishnah, temple period. We're learning about this. Okay, so a chassid was someone who went above and beyond the letter of the law. It wasn't just like, okay, this is baseline of where I have to focus and what I have to accomplish. I'm going to go beyond that. I'm going to see how I can go the next mile, right? We all meet people in life who do that. Or sometimes we could do that for someone. We want to do a favor for them and we can do it like just get it done. Or sometimes we could do it above and beyond. So that was defined as a chassid. Okay, so that's the one so far makes sense. Fine. Rabbi Shimon ben Nisanel, fears of Erot. Okay, interesting. He was someone who had he stayed away from things that were not good for him. I could learn from that. But again, why? Like, why these 5 students? Why is this here? How does this help me? If Ethics of Our Fathers is supposed to teach me about how is this a how? Okay. And moving forward, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach is like a fountain, ever increasing in strength. He added to wisdom. Again, what is that? Okay, how is that a how for me? If we said Ethics of Our Fathers is about my interpersonal skills, about how I could accomplish and how I could grow as a person, how I could do what I do, but do it as a better version of myself. Where do these things come in? So now we're going to wrap up. We'll read up the rest of the Mishnah and then we'll kind of take it apart as we usually do. We'll put it back together and hopefully we'll have a practical takeaway from here that we can actually bring into our day-to-day lives. As we said, Torah is meant to be real and relevant and practical and something that's supposed to infuse and uplift my life. So if I'm learning this Mishnah, it needs to do something for me as a person that I could go through life a better version of myself. So far, it's a little confusing. Does that make sense? Does the confusion make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's different than the other Mishnahs that we've covered so far, which seem way more clear, even if there's layers to unpack and to dig deeper, it's more clear that there's a message. Here it's like, what's going on here? Okay, so continuing on the Mishnah, Rabbi Yochanan would say, if all of the children of Israel's Chachamim would be on one side of the scale and Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus on the other side, he would outweigh them all. Okay, cool. So he's kind of further validating and strengthening why Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus was so significant, okay, as a scholar. But again, how does that help me? That Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus was like a great scholar. How does that help me? Okay. And Abba Shaul said in a different version of this statement, in Rabbi Yochanan's name, if all of the children of Yisrael Chacham will be on one side of the scale, including even the wisdom of Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, Eliezer ben Arach, on the other side would outweigh them all. Okay, so there's someone who's smarter than, or seemingly smarter than Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. Again, why is that here? One of the principles we said when we study Torah and we learn together is we have to understand that every single word there's a reason for. It's not like random, or like, you ever read a book or you're reading an article and you see like words that you know don't need to be there, right? They like seem superfluous, or you seem like the writer is just like adding layers and they don't make, it doesn't make sense. Like it just doesn't, like, why is that even here?
Wait, I'm having trouble following this. Maybe I'm not reading it correctly. At first, the next to last paragraph, Rabbi Yochanan says that Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus is the one whose knowledge would outweigh everybody else's. But then in the last paragraph, Abba Shaul, whoever he is, says...
Abba Shaul, in the biography, it says who he is. He was a student of Rabbi Akiva. Very little is known about his life, except that he worked in the Chaver Kadisha. The Gemara says that he was very tall, so tall that Rabbi Tarfon, who was also tall, only reached his shoulders. The term Abba is referred to as respect, similar to the title father. So that's all we know about him. But we do know that he's quoting Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai.
And what he says was that Rabbi Yochanan actually said that Eliezer ben Arach was the wisest, the smartest, not
right.
Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. So
right. Again, what is this saying to us? This, I think, if anything, what you're saying, Sarah, is it's more confusing.
Yes.
It's confusing. This Mishnah, what is it? Like, we could understand greet everyone with a smile. We can understand don't be judgmental. We could understand love everyone unconditionally. We can understand know where you come from, know where you're going. All of those, we get how those are kind of instructional. This one does, what is going on here, right? What's a practical takeaway? And if we're studying it together, there's for sure. First of all, it's part of Mishnah and it's part of ethics of our fathers, not just, look, there's other parts in the Talmud that give us historical context or information. This is not just information for the sake of information. It's something deeper going on here, okay? So let's just kind of understand, first behind the quote. If someone wants to read, Sarah, you have it on the right side, there's behind the quote on 65. Do you want to read that?
The right, say that again, impressive.
The right side of the book, there is the behind the quote.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
The praiseworthy quality of Rabbi Eliezer was his tremendous memory. As a leader addressing the needs of the general community, Rabbi Yochanan felt that it was most important to have a leader who remembered all the halachos and could properly guide the people. This is why Rabbi Yochanan said that Rabbi Eliezer's quality outweighed the specialties of all the others. Okay,
so that's kind of a little bit more clarity. But let's unpack this a little bit, because what is this Mishnah actually saying? What are we supposed to learn of the fact that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai praises his students? That's wonderful that he appreciated them, right? It's wonderful that he valued them, but what can we learn from it? So as an interesting kind of real right that jumps off the bat, he doesn't just start off by saying, wow, I have these amazing students and, you know, here's who they are. He goes to take the time to describe, and obviously it's documented here, their uniqueness of each individual scholar, each sage, their qualities that they brought to the table, okay? Mm-hmm. So right away, the fact that this Mishnah is a little bit different, obviously is there to teach us something. The fact that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 outstanding students, instead of just saying, okay, they were all a collective group of outstanding students, What is he doing? Rabbi Yochanan actually is highlighting and celebrating their unique differences. I think in life, a lot of times, we look at things with a monolithic lens. Hopefully, as we evolve and we mature, we're able to see things differently. I remember my mother once saying, every child is like their own unique instrument, right? The question is, what part in the orchestra do they take place? Like, what role do they have? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is not talking here about changing who his students were. He wasn't saying, okay, you are, you don't forget anything, but like, I need to change that about you. He's actually celebrating who they were, their uniqueness of who they were, and working with these individual students to bring out who they are, their individual unique potential. Interestingly enough, sometimes it's easy to just surround ourselves with people who are just like us, right? Because then we're not challenged, and then this one thinks the way I think, and this one feels the way I feel, whether it's our friends, whether it's a social scene, whether it's voices on Facebook. We like to surround ourselves with people who, like, it works for us. Now, of course, positive energy and being careful with, you know, the relationships you have are so, so, so important. But here's something different that Rabbi Yochanan is trying to teach us. Is the people we meet in our lives, it's not about building them to be what we want. Whether it's our spouses, whether it's our children, whether it's our literal students, it's about looking at who they are and seeing the good in them, seeing their potential, seeing their qualities. Because none of his students is he defining as the same. He's looking at each one and saying, not, oh, I had 5 good students, wow. He's looking at each one and saying, this is their unique quality that they brought to the table. And it's not just academic. He's not just discussing scholastic achievements here. It's also has to do with their nature. But the question is why is he doing that? In life, at times, we need to be able to see the potential that others have. He's seeing their qualities. You could see qualities that your child has, but taking the time to articulate it, in this case, document it, put it as a part of this is part of Torah. Mishnayos is part of Torah. To document it and articulate it. So there's one layer, identifying positive qualities someone has. Layer number 2 would be not just identifying it, would be articulating it and documenting it. And then helping that person see that within themselves, their potential that they have, and raise the bar and see them through that light and in that light. Because often in life, it's very easy to see the lesser qualities, right? If he said, Rabbi Eliezer ben Harkonis is like a cement tank who does not let out a drop, right? Did not lose a drop. He could have said, he never forgets anything. He always drives me crazy, reminding me of every detail, right? Because every quality, you and I know, we could look at our children, and a child who sometimes could be very, very stubborn, we could see them as very, very stubborn, or we could remind ourselves that this quality is essentially pure and good, and our job as educators, as friends, as mentors, as parents, as spouses, is to see how that quality could shine, because it's inherently neutral. Even a child who's very, very stubborn, or a spouse who's very, very stubborn, that stubbornness is in essence a good quality. It's how it's manifested and how it's used, and how we, as in our role, help that child see that quality in a good light. Because you know, the truth is, for a lot of kids, it's very hard to see that potential when they're getting in trouble from their stubbornness. I'm giving the example of stubbornness because it's, I think, a common one that many of us can relate to in different capacities, or different people we meet who may be very, right? But what in essence is stubbornness? It's determination, it's grit, it's drive, it's persistence, right? Those qualities will go very far for someone in life when used in the right way. Our job is to help the child use it in the right way. But we got to first be able to see it in the child. Then we have to be able to articulate it. and help that child see it within themselves. There's a beautiful quote from the Rebbe about articulating praise. I'm going to read it because it's a quote, and you know me and quotes don't have to read it. So a word of praise and a word of encouragement is as good as done in the spiritual reality of the soul. Even before a good word has yielded a good deed, it has already had a profound and lasting effect upon the inner state of our souls and our world. When we speak favorably of others, accentuating his or her positive side, we will help him realize himself in that manner, that you have defined him, and they will grow accordingly. What does that mean? That means sometimes we need to hear it from someone who hears it, who sees it in us. So there was a young child who came to, kindergarten, and everyone's, learning their letters and their shapes and their colors. And this child is like, behind. And then it comes to letters, and all the kids are learning ABCs, and putting rat and cat and mat together, and the child can't do it. And then the kids start moving on to doing Hebrew and English and alphabet, and the child can't do it. And now it's second grade and third grade, and the child gets really good at bluffing the system and like memorizing things and as if they know, but they really can't read properly. And then this child kind of tells himself, everyone else can do it but me, right? So there must be something wrong with me. And then at 9, this child, they discover that there's something internally wrong with the child's focus in their eyes, and they repair it with vision therapy and glasses, and the child kind of is catching up, but still always a little bit behind when it comes to these skills. And at 14, my math and science teacher looked at me and she said, "I think you think you're dumb." And you know what? She was right. For years, I told myself I'm dumb because everyone else knew how to read, and everyone knew how to, and I had to find myself by that because of that experience, because we do hold ourselves and we do create a story in our head about ourselves always. And I've seen how that, now, she was the first person to call me on it. But she didn't just leave it at that. She said, "I think you think you're dumb, but actually what you don't realize yet is your brain works very fast, and you just never got a strong foundation of those skills." But actually I could see that through someone stopping, pausing, seeing, articulating, and lifting me up to this different perspective, I from then on was able to shine. Now I still am I'm a slow reader. Anyone knows I'm not a slow talker, right? That we know, but I'm a slow reader, and it's still like, I could watch my kids polish off a 400-page book in a day. It's not my strength, but I was able, because someone stopped and paused and thought and saw and articulated and lifted me up to that place, I was able to work on redefining that in my head. And a little secret, when I first moved to College Station, people at Beth Shalom asked us, could we do some Torah classes for them? And I was like, that's for you. I'm not teaching. Like I could teach preschool. Like I'm very comfortable and safe in preschool. I could teach Hebrew school. I love education. My background's education. I'm passionate about teaching. I even think that because of my own education experiences, I think I'm a more sensitive teacher and a sensitive educator because of what I went through in a very large, big fish tank system, where kids could easily get lost. And I think that made me a better educator. That being said, I still didn't see myself comfortable teaching Torah to adults. Now it happens to be, you ladies know it, this is the highlight of my week. So I love this. And I teach, 4, 5, 6 times a week now, but it was that story that I had where I was holding myself to an unhealthy place, and I let that hold me back. And I think that for us, there's so much to learn from this Mishnah. Seeing the individuality, seeing flaws, not as flaws that held them back. See, none of my teachers until that point were able to say, you struggle with reading because your brain is actually very fast and your eyes and your brain are having a hard time communicating. No one was able to reframe that for me. So I just held it as like, this is my issue, right? When at the end of the day, what the Rebbe is saying in that quote is that when we could see it in someone else and we can help define it and articulate it and express it, what we're doing is we're helping that person define it for themselves. So now with that mindset, this Mishnah is totally different. Now this Mishnah is teaching us to see people as individuals, to see the potential people have, and to help them see it within themselves. right? Completely different story. Because why would Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai even document that he had more than 5 students? Why is he telling us who they are and who they aren't? No, there's a goal here. The goal is that we can actually do that to ourselves and to others that we see. So first we got to check in with ourselves. And we have to also be honest. How do I see my child? Am I limiting them? Am I holding them back? Am I letting a school hold them back or limit them? Right? Or maybe I see my spouse a certain way and I can't see them any other way. I see a certain behavior that annoys me or drives me crazy and I can't see it coming from a different place, right? So this Mishnah really is a real powerful realignment. The other quote I want to share with you is in a brief thought also similar to this is every person, and this is also from the Rebbe, but you know, so much of my inspiration comes from the Rebbe because I think the Rebbe had such a unique perspective on the world and on life. And my greatest teacher, right? In Hasidic philosophy. Obviously, my children are actually my greatest teacher on life experiences, but I learned from the Rebbe how to process those experiences. So this is another quote that I find fascinating is every person has a unique quality in which he can outweigh all others. Like the 5 students of Rabbi Yochanan, each person should toil, meaning you've got to work for it, and cultivate this quality and bring it into light. What's interesting is, I will share with you that when we were about to move to College Station, I sat in a workshop, and it was a workshop on how to prepare Torah classes. And Rivki Slanim, who, if you remember, she did the Unorthodox panel. She's brilliant, scholar, author, sage, wonderful role model, mentor, incredible. And I remember I was sitting in the workshop and it was like how to build a Torah class from scratch. And I remember like at one point she like gave us a job to, and I like threw my hands up. I'm like, I can't do this. And I remember she came over to the table. I tell her this now. She banged on the table like this. She's like, you can do this. You can do this. She was like so mad at me that I like gave up. Like, I can't do this. And I actually shared with her, I'm like Rivki, what you pushed me. I was like, no, you can. Like, stop. Like we need to cultivate those within ourselves, and we need to cultivate others. And I think, you know, Limor, I'm gonna pick on you for a second, because I've watched you over the past few years. You have such a gift. Limor is always looking to expand and stretch the gift that she has within, whether it's through arts, through jewelry making, through yoga, through ways of connecting and her talents and gifts she has within. And it's very easy to get stuck by the things that hold us back. And I know for launching your jewelry business, you know, there's a lot of steps that, okay, nachon? But we don't let it stop us. We don't let it stop us. And I see that also, you know, I learned from every single one of you so much, you know, our life experiences and not allowing the adversity or the challenge just to hold us back, but getting beyond that and finding the potential within. Because, you know, we go through life and it says that we don't even, the neurologists, I think we use about like 10% of our brain's potential. That's crazy. That's crazy. So we got to see it in ourselves, right? Sarah, you thought you were finished contributing in the world of psychology. You've changed so many lives in such a short way, in this amount of time, right? So I think this Mishnah is so powerful and reaffirming and such an essential reminder for the child within and for the people that we interact with to see potential. Another interesting thing is there's a very famous line that says in Mishlei, it says, Chanoch lenar al pi darko. You may have heard this before. Educate your child according to his ways. And then it continues, because even as he grows, he will not depart from it. Meaning if you really raise a child, why does it say Chanoch lenar al pi darko, according to his ways? You're telling me when Mishlei was written thousands of years ago, the sages were telling us to educate individual children according to their individual needs. Ladies, in 1999, Howard Gardner came out with a philosophy called multiple intelligences. I was very steeped in the preschool field. It hit the preschool field with a wave. It was this whole new idea that he identified 8 different types of learners, the musical learner, the spatial learner, the kinesthetic learner, the sensory learner, the logical mathematical learner, the interpersonal learner. And what his whole like chidush and his novelty that he brought to the table, and Howard Gardner, brilliant mind, changed a lot of early childhood education and philosophy in a deep way. His whole thing was to really help people learn with their own varied intelligence. Not my way of learning, not your way of learning, their way of learning. And the whole way it affected the early childhood world was, and that's where I was steeped in, is that suddenly when we were preparing our lesson plans, we made sure that the musical learner is also going to connect with that idea, or the interpersonal learner can also learn in that way. So it was this like, whoa, novel, mind-blowing idea. And Howard Gardner says it was of utmost importance that we recognize and nurture all the varied human intelligences. If we can mobilize the spectrum of human abilities, not only will people feel better about themselves and feel more confident, it's even possible that they will feel more engaged and better able to join the rest of the world community in working for the broader good. Okay, that makes sense. But this is an idea that Mishle has been teaching us for thousands of years. Now, we have to bring that into our lives. We have to bring that into our education system. We have to bring that into our children. We have to bring it to ourselves, right? To see all different parts of our nature. Sometimes we spend so much time fighting a part of our nature that Hashem gave us. And if we actually work on it and tweak it and adjust it, we can use it as fuel to become and live our potential. And this is what this Mishnah is teaching us. Right?
Still doesn't explain why he would say fortunate is his mother who gave birth to such a son. Where is
Excellent. Excellent. You're right. You're like, what does it have to do with his mother? Okay, first of all, we all know a Jewish mother invests hundreds of hours in her children. So fine, but the blessed the mother who birthed her, how does that help him? So actually there is a beautiful, I'm glad you brought it up, but there's actually a beautiful backstory to his mother's role. Okay, and his mother's role actually began before he arrived. It describes that his mother would visit the Bet Midrash, the house of Torah study, while she was pregnant. And she would say to the sages, keep my unborn child in mind, that he should grow to be a Torah scholar, that it should be raised and nurtured with these values. That even in utero, she was thinking about who will this child be? What is this child's potential? And she didn't just say it theoretically sitting on the couch. She would go out, travel to the Bet Midrash, spend time there, because she understood that her unborn child was being affected by the environment, which we now know scientifically thousands of years later, right? That the music a child listens to or the emotions the mother feels while she's pregnant actually affect the child in utero. There's stories in the Talmud where a woman brings her child to the sage and says, okay, I just had a baby. When do I start education? And he said, you're 9 months too late. Because according to the Torah, it starts in utero from conception. That's where education actually begins. So actually, tradition amongst Chabad Hasidim is when we're pregnant, we're more careful about what we listen to. We're more careful about what we watch. We're more careful not to even go to a zoo to gaze at wild animals when pregnant. That's how sensitive we are, actually. The food we eat, and I tell this sometimes to my young Jewish Aggie girls, I say, listen, even if you're not gonna be careful about kosher when you're pregnant, keep kosher. Don't eat ham when you're pregnant. The child's gonna get some of it. Okay, so why do we have this idea? From here. We learn it from Talmud that chinuch education starts then. The other thing that actually describes is that when he was a baby, she would take his cradle again to the Bet Midrash. Could you imagine? And put it there so he would listen to the sound of Torah learning. What he listened to, she was very careful. And actually, we're very careful with our young children not to play music or that the environment, that the soul that's coming into the world is like fresh off the press and young and impressionable. And the Rebbe actually compares it to a sapling, right? The difference between a sapling and a big tree, or the difference between a seed and a sapling, right? A seed, if you nick a seed, it's damage. If you nick a sapling, it's damage. You nick a tree that's big and strong and fine, it's okay. It's actually the Jewish perspective on chinuch education and why it's so significant when a child is young and how much we can affect in a different one. And I think really it's also sometimes, I think it's talking to the child within us, meaning, because I think we all have this child within that we have to revisit in order to get through some of adulthood. And so we have to be sometimes aware of what that child's been exposed to and what are some of the, like Sarah, you were talking about triggers, right? Last week. So much of the things that trigger us came from our experiences when we were younger. So if we take time to kind of address that, we can move forward. If something's bothering us, right? You shared with us on Thursday very deep wisdom about this. And I think that this is also something that we can learn from. But she was specifically known to nurture and nourish her child that he should be in a Torah environment to learn. We don't take for granted. You know what, I have to tell you, when my kids are younger, they don't watch. I'm so careful with what they watch and what we listen to. And because I want to choose what goes into their subconscious and into their, I mean, obviously Hashem is, we never know, right? But we could do our part. And so we're careful to have, whether it's Jewish music, you know, media content that's going to infuse them and uplift them. Like, I don't, you know, like, who do I want my child to look at as a mentor? Who do I want my child to look up to? Right? So these are things that we can learn from that. So basically, yeah.
What year was
Mishle?
Yeah.
Or the explanation about, so the explanation about Reb Hananiah's mother comes from Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud. Let's Google what year that was, because I'm not good at that. I'll ask my historians right here. Menachem, Talmud Yerushalmi, what year was it? Around when was it compiled? Second Temple period?
16 and 1800 years ago.
Between 16 and 1800 years ago. There you go.
No, there is an exact year.
There is an exact year, he's just not sure. But it was this narrative, this story about Rabbi Hananiah is documented in Talmud.
200 years after the destruction of the second.
Okay, around 200 years after the destruction of the Second Temple. Thank you. See, they're celebrating his brain type, who remembers dates and years and historical context, and mine doesn't. And you know what? We got to accept who we are, what our limitations are, right? That's not my strength. So there we go. We move forward. So just moving forward to look a little bit about it, just to understand this, what do we learn from Rabbi Hananiah? The fact that his mother was so focused, laser focused on his education. We can also learn from it kind of something interesting, is that a child is really born with infinite potential. A child is a godly soul. And I remember I shared this with, I remember the triplets were born on 9/11. And I remember the nurse, as she's, you know, wheeling me into the OR for the C-section, she says, oh, 9/11, what a birthday. Like, Nebuch, poor them, you know? Like, poor them. What a birthday of all days. And I actually said to her, I don't know how I had like a lucid brain at that moment, because it was so early in the morning and I probably was so nervous and shocked, and the unknown was right before me and they were early and I knew the NICU, like there was a lot of emotions going on there, and hormones, I'm sure. But I remember saying to her, no, like on a day where there was so much destruction and so many loss of life, I see it as an honor to bring light and potential of 3 new souls into the world. And I really felt that way, and I still feel that way, meaning every child we have, and I've said this sometimes to college students, I'm like, it's not like Chabad rabbis and rebbitzins don't know birth control exists. It's that we understand that every single child that we are able to bring into the world has infinite potential. They're a godly divine soul. Like we talked about last week. If they're a godly divine soul and they have infinite potential, how incredible it is to partner with Hashem in bringing that infinite potential into the world. And so Rabbi Hananiah's mother understood that he had that potential, and she created an environment for it. And there's no doubt that the environment we come from affects us, right? We all know that. We're all adults here, so we all can definitely say in our experiences that the environment we come from affects us. Now, it doesn't stop us from growing. As I shared earlier, that story, sometimes it can be fuel to help us go beyond the status quo and go beyond our, you know, maybe challenging circumstances and find light and do good, right? Many of us learn the most from our challenges and our potentials. learn the most about our potential from our challenges and from our difficulties. But as we said last week, do you remember the story I shared last week, Rabbi Zusha, who was a very famous sage, really righteous man, and he said, like, after 120, I'm not worried that God's not going to wonder why I wasn't, like, you know, as great as Moses or as great as King David. Like, God's going to want to know why I wasn't the best Rabbi Zusha. So what we need to do is see within our children potential, be able to articulate it, be able to help them shine as individuals, and help them find that within themselves. Because you know what's interesting? You know, my first 3 children, I feel like I say this all the time, and I think my kids think it's cliche. I learned the most from them, from raising them. Truly, truly, truly learned the most from each. And I'm still learning. I'm always learning from them. So one of the things with my first 3 kids, I thought, like, okay, they're all the 3 same gender. They're close in age. This one, the oldest, the middle, the youngest. I had like all sorts of theories as to like what our hand and our role in this was. And then I had 3 babies born at the same time. And I told my husband, I feel like I'm doing a graduate level, like, case study on nature versus nurture. I didn't have the graduate student to do the documentation. That's why you never saw it documented. But I felt like I was living through an insane experiment. And you know what's interesting? In Baylor, they actually wanted us to sign up to be like part of a study. I said no, because I just didn't need my life like cross it. It wasn't like I was just a mom of 6 kids and triplets. I was also like a shlucha and co-directing a center, and there was just a lot more layers. Not that a mom of 6 is no layers, but it was very busy. A hectic time. So what I learned very, very quickly is the nature versus nurture argument and debate. And obviously nurture is huge. Like we said earlier, it creates our experiences, our trigger. But what I saw was with my oldest, I would always like say, well, this one, you know, was born when we had a lot of time and attention to focus and reach that child. And this one was born at a chaotic, stressful time. And like our marriage wasn't all sorts of reasons why the nurture affected the child. And of course, nurture affects child. But then when I had the triplets and suddenly they had the same older siblings, the home was in the same place, the family was in the same place, the marriage was in the same place, their life experience was the same place. And I'll never forget, I could say no to all 3 of them. And one would be outraged and deflect with like anger and frustration. How could you? The other one would personally take it all inside. Like, you must hate me or not love me, or like, what's wrong with me? Like, really personalize it. And the third one was like, okay, whatever, and move forward. And that's only one example. But I was able to see how they learned and they grew, and it's so clear to me that it's so tied into who they are as people and their potential in this world. And it's a life lesson that I'll always hold with me. And it affected how I see also students and their experiences and how they come to the table and how they're individuals. And not to expect, it affects me as a Hebrew school director. Seeing each child for who they are, who their potential is, not who I see them as or what I think they could be, right? Finding that light within them. And so really, in essence, this Mishnah, we could peel away all the layers and we can read some more of the stories on the side, but I think the overall takeaway is seeing the potential in others, helping them see that within them, helping them redefine qualities, being able to articulate it. How often do we tell people the good things we know about them, right? We don't. Whether we think it's awkward, whether we don't, right? We don't spend enough time complimenting those we love sometimes, right? Or finding the light that they have within. How I know for sure I take my husband for granted. I love him, I appreciate him, I value him, but how often do I tell him, like, you're such a rock, you're so, I don't often enough. So I think there's, this Mishnah is really like teaching us something special about how we see others, how we see ourselves, how we see difference in this world. Like, do I look at someone just because their, opinion or their lifestyle or their choices, and seeing potential and seeing qualities that sometimes come out in a negative way, and seeing that they just need shaping and molding and love and nurturing. So it's a pretty high bar, this Mishnah, by the way, now that we re-examine it. It's a really big to-do list because it starts within. Because if we can't see good within ourselves, we can't see good with others. Earlier, if you recall, we learned that a man sees in others what he has partial qualities, right? We don't see, if we didn't have part of that quality or that characteristics within ourselves, a lot of times when we see flaws in others, we're really seeing something within ourselves that needs repair. So we got to start within, and then we got to remember to try and in a practical way, see good within others. Could any of you share how, now that we've kind of unpacked a little bit, how this Mishnah could like really practically bring into our lives? Because I've definitely spoken for a long time here. Any thoughts? It's a big one.
Yeah, well, I mean, it definitely speaks to dealing with children and students. It's a little harder to look at.
Yes, hold on 1 second. Yes, can you just take care of this? I'm stopping that video because we're sharing now. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's a little harder to imagine, you know, what that means for just equal peer relationships.
Explain.
Meaning, if I'm the designated authority, if I'm a teacher, if I'm a parent, even if I'm a teacher of adults, then it's my role to to nurture my students, to nurture my children, to do that. In a friendship or even just an acquaintanceship, it's a little presumptuous to think that I'm going to, you know, and actually when I think about it as in friendships, I mean, it depends, in friendships in which it's equal, where each of us does that kind of nurturing, that feels okay.
Right.
In friendships in which I feel like that this person needs nurturing, I feel like I'm being their therapist and not their friend.
So I wonder if that's because you're looking at through the lens of a therapist. You know, like you're seeing this through that lens. And of course you see life through that lens, right? But I think, to me, I understand what you're saying, that it's easier to do, let's say as a child, even as a spouse, to see the potential in your spouse and be able to articulate the good in them. So I think what we could do when it comes to people, like you said, even just an acquaintance, like, is it my job to see the potential in every person I see and build that up? Like who am I, right? Like, that could feel, like you said, presumptuous. The way I see it in that context, let's say I'm looking into myself. Let's say I'm seeing it in my own life. I'll give you an example. This story I think will help. We had years ago, we were on campus and we had our 3 little kids with us. We had a table. It was welcome week or Gig'em week. And I remember a student walks over to the table. She kind of marches over. She looks at us quizzically, like curiously. She's like, "Is this the Hillel table?" So I'm like, "No, this is the Chabad table." She like looks up and down, looks at the kids. She's like, "Oh, okay, where's the Hillel table?" And I was like, "Oh, it's over there." She left. Okay. Fast forward, I was actually just talking to her last week. She ended up marrying a Jewish Aggie, a guy she met at our Chabad house, and we're very close to both of them. We talk, you know, at least a few times a year, and we laugh about that experience. At that moment, she was an acquaintance. If I saw the behavior and wrote her off, the next time she walked in or I had an interaction with her, I wouldn't have reached out to her, right? So we always have to see the potential that people have and not just look at the external behavior. And I think that's really hard. The way I see it is like, let's say you're in the supermarket and someone's rude to you. You can either be like, "Oh my gosh," and write them off and, you know, whatever, rant about it or get angry at them. Or you can be like, there's that person's potential, maybe there's something going on there, right? So I see that it is applicable, obviously not in the same capacity as, let's say, a mother's role, but I think that it is possible for us to learn from this even in our casual engagements. maybe it's, I see someone ranting on Facebook, some mishagas, that I think is so off by base. You know, like go on Facebook for 5 minutes, your blood pressure will go up because people are so, yes, masks, no masks.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Good for you. Meshuggah. The world has gone Meshuggah. Every single
check something, yeah.
Yeah, and every single person is like, they're going to save the world from their keyboard and their pajamas. You know what I'm saying? Keyboard warriors galore. Hide behind their little camera and their little phone and no. Like, but like I could see, I actually have unfollowed certain people, not because I care about their opinion. Their opinion is opinion. Because I knew that if I consistently see the negativity that they're posting, it's going to affect that I see them in a negative way. Does that make sense? Instead of seeing their potential.
Yeah.
And that I don't think you need to be a therapist for. That you just need to be compassionate and open-minded and see it. And there are students, and I've shared this with you. I shared with you this student who really was not in the best place emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, whatever, in many ways. And that student later reflecting, you know, to Rabbi and I, like, you guys saw potential I didn't even know I had. So I think we could do that for others. Like we can do that. But I think it's hard work, and it takes setting aside our own personal biases or our opinions or our own lenses that we see things through. But to be able to see, like for Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai to be able to take the time to document this idea that every single one of his top 5 students had unique qualities in who they are and what they brought to the table. And even qualities that we didn't see. Or we wouldn't be visible. Why would anyone else know about Rabbi Hananiah's mother, right?
Yeah. What strikes me as impressive about this, I mean, it just,
yeah,
I should have, you know, it's something I could have realized at any point, but is that historically, in terms of world culture, what I've learned is that cultures didn't see childhood as a stage in life until maybe 150 years ago.
Yeah, children should be seen, not heard, right?
And that they were little adults. I mean, I don't know how true that is, but that's what's in all the psychology books, or
yeah.
it was, you know, that there was no such thing as child psychology, or no idea that you need to treat children differently. Education of children was just very rote. It was treated as if their minds were like adult minds. And that this was almost 2,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, that the Mishnah is talking about styles of learning. You know, and
celebrating differences, not a monolithic thing. We're you know, I tell students, I'm like, don't try to be someone else. That person's already taken. You're meant to be you.
But in terms, I guess I'm thinking in terms of, you know, why Judaism has survived is that it has always placed an emphasis on education from early childhood, and other cultures don't.
Yeah, so I think that there's so much more to say about how we view when a child is young. Judaism sees it and the preciousness of it. I mean, we were careful, and again, this is probably something that the Rebbe made us more sensitive to not even have non-Jewish animals, not kosher, sorry, not non-Jewish, non-kosher animals around our young children. Violent animals. So lions and bears, you would never find a nursery in a Chabad family decorated with lions and bears. Maybe ducks and chickens and sheep and cows, gentle animals. All kosher animals are herbivores, but any aggressive animal we would never do. Because again, and it's such a slight detail, right? But I think also that sensitivity makes us more aware of what our children are absorbing. You know, watch what your kids do in their imaginary play, right? Like what's in the system. And obviously that's only in that case. So now many of us in this group are not at that case where our children are young and we're being careful. I've said it to my kids, I said, we made sure to keep certain things in this house a certain way so that the time and your brain is young and sponge-like, we're careful about what's going in. So it doesn't mean just go on social media or watch any Disney movie. Like, gotta sometimes step back and like, what am I feeding? What is this child being fed? Not just, we're so careful about nutrition. We're so careful about food and vitamins, and what about that, right? So look, these Mishnahs are not meant to like make us feel very overwhelmed, because this Mishnah could feel so overwhelming. There's so much in it. It's not meant to make us feel overwhelmed. But if we could take one takeaway, whether it's in myself, my spouse, my children, my grandchildren, if I could take one takeaway in any area, then we've accomplished a lot today. We got a lot to do, a lot of work to do. The days, what did we say? Oh no, it wasn't this mission. The day is short, the work is long, and the workers are sometimes a little lazy. Right? A lot to do, and there's not enough time, and there's so many areas of our lives that we could improve. So that's why we gotta bring it practically into like one or two ways that I'm gonna be more conscious, aware, sensitive. Whether it's my spouse seeing the potential and not just seeing it, appreciating it, not just appreciating it, but articulating it, right? Expressing it. We're very quick to express, I can't say we. I'm quick to express things that are not going the way I want it to be, right? You guys don't have that issue, but I'm quick to express those things. Cheryl, it looks like you may relate to what I just said.
I am quite guilty of finding fault with Joe long before I find good things to say about Joe. So yes, I've got an action item here to solve some of that.
Yeah. It's an action. It's for all of us.
Yeah.
It's really for all of us. This is like this. You could learn this mission on next week and still have more to unpack and still have more work to do. It's not like we learned it and now it's done. Like I said, there's a reason we study this mission again and again. Every year, this comes out again, and we're like, wait, I forgot that. I need to remember that.
I feel like
work in progress. Yeah, Leonor, go ahead.
It feels like it just needs to remind us to practice more forgiveness to ourselves, to everyone around us.
Yes.
Just a little bit more.
A little
forgiven.
You know what? Sometimes just, even if we're not able to turn this into something that I can do this week or today or tomorrow, it just brings it back to the front, because I don't think anything here is like novel that we never heard of before, right? I don't think anything here is like earth-shattering. Yes, Sarah, I do agree with you that it's earth-shattering. That 1600 years ago, this is what was being talked about and taught and laid as a foundation. That I do think is quite remarkable. And the more we study, I remember, maybe Limor, you were here, or maybe Cheryl, I'm not sure. Judith, I'm not sure who was here, but years ago we did a section on biblical women. It was I love that. And we could do that again, maybe in the fall. We went through each of these biblical women that they're documented for a reason. And we learned about their story, and we learned about looking at them differently, because if there's billions of women who've existed. So like, why these women, right? What was so unique about them? And I remember when we got to Rebecca being pregnant, and it describes the challenge and difficulty of her pregnancy and how she went to seek advice from the sages at that time. And I remember there was a professor who's a history professor, and she was in on that class, and she got very emotional. She's like, to think that 4,000 years ago, it's documented about the challenge that a woman goes through when pregnant. She says, 50 years ago, no one thought about what a woman feels like when she's pregnant. She was like, she was so moved by it. She says, it's so moving to see a Torah that a woman, what she's doing, what she's accomplishing is so significant. This is 4,500 years ago, 4,000 years ago, right? That's pretty impressive. So we have to just, I feel like whenever we learn parts of Torah, if it's Torah Chaim, which means a living Torah, it means it's vibrant and alive and relevant. If it's God's will and God's wisdom and wisdom didn't have an expiration date. He's like, here's a Torah, but I think I just need you to keep it in mind for the next 1,000 years after that, discard. Nope. It's eternal. If it's God's will and God's wisdom, then God's will and wisdom is eternal. So it's relevant to now. And I think that's a really powerful takeaway for us. I mean, there's so much to take away. But like, yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
I do question, that this is all about male students.
Yes.
And
So let's do the women next.
were there women scholars? Were there?
Absolutely. The entire structure of prayer as we know it right now, the Amida, the holiest part of prayer is designed by a woman.
Mm.
You see, like we had women, there's women prophetesses, women judges. This is not new for us as women. So let's maybe do women next. Biblical women is an amazing, we did it before. And maybe it's time to bring it back and redo it. I mean, again, because I was raised with these women as being my role model. So I feel like the more we study about them and learn about them, these women are just like, they're awesome. So I'm up to doing that next. If you guys want to pick up, do maybe 1 or 2 weeks more of Mishnah, and we can do women next. I'm cool with that. The Torah certainly has a lot to say about women.
All right.
Good.
I'm up for it.
All right.
When you think it's a good time, yeah.
Maybe we'll do a few more weeks since this is a seasonal thing of Pirkei Avot. We're not going to touch it upon it for next year. So let's maybe dig a little deeper, 1 or 2 more weeks, and then we'll see. I'm down. You know me.
Okay.
And again, if it's Torah, there's always something to learn from it that's relevant and practical for our lives.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
All right, ladies. Have a wonderful Wednesday. Sarah, we'll see you tomorrow.
I will be there. I will
Thank
be
you.
on tomorrow. Okay.
All right.
See you tomorrow, ladies.
Looking
All right.
very forward. Bye.
Bye.